Welcome to this WiseOwl Power BI tutorial. In this video we'll cover the basics of working with Report Builder for Power BI Report Server. We'll start with a quick comparison of Power BI reports and paginated reports, then look at how you can find and install the correct version of Report Builder for Power BI Report Server. We'll use that application to create a simple paginated report, and then from the web portal we'll upload that report to your Power BI Report Server. We'll look at a couple of ways of editing an uploaded report, and then finally we'll quickly mention how you can publish a paginated report to a Power BI Premium workspace. So let's get started. If you followed along with part 2.1 of this series, you'll have learnt how to install and configure an on-premises Power BI report server. When you've done that, you can choose to create Power BI reports using a specialised version of the Power BI desktop application, configured specifically for Power BI Report Server. Creating the reports works in a fairly standard way. You get some data from a variety of sources, and then you create visualizations based on that data. But rather than uploading this finished report to the online Power BI web service, what you do instead is choose to save this to your on-premises Power BI Report Server. When you've done that, you can view your report via a Power BI web portal, and you'll view that via a web browser. So in this case, in Internet Explorer, you can view a report simply by clicking on it. And when it's loaded, you'll be able to interact with it in a fairly standard way as well. So I can use my slices to filter my other report visuals. I can also choose to print my report using the File menu. I can also choose to export the data from individual visuals using the menu, the More Options menu at the top right hand corner. So I can choose to export the data to a CSV file, for example. Now, despite its name, you're not limited to only deploying Power BI reports to a Power BI report server. You can also deploy something called a paginated report. If you have any experience with SQL Server reporting services or Report Builder, you'll be right at home with how paginated reports work. If I just switch over to a web portal for a SQL Server reporting services report server, I've got a few basic paginated reports deployed here. Now, these are nowhere near as visually impressive as Power BI reports, and they're nowhere near as interactive either. Clicking on things in a paginated report doesn't tend to do much of anything at all. You actually have to work quite hard to make anything interactive here. I've got some basic column sorting by clicking on the column headers, and I've got another report which allows me to collapse and expand some table groups. You may recognise these if you followed along with the Report Builder tutorial, but it's quite a lot of effort to get any of that to work. Where paginated reports are quite good is in the range of options they have in terms of exporting. So if I click on my little drop down list here to export the report, I can export it directly to an Excel format or a variety of other formats as well. So a bit more in the way of options compared to Power BI reports. What we're going to do in this video is explain how to install the tool which allows you to create paginated reports and deploy them to your Power BI report server. Now, there are a couple of different tools you could use to build a paginated report, but in this video we'll focus on using the Report Builder application. You may already be familiar with this tool from a separate video series called Report Builder 2016. This is the tool we've been using to create and deploy reports to a reporting services report server. If you already have it installed, you could use it to build a paginated report and then just simply choose to deploy it to a Power BI report server instead. But there is a separate version of Report Builder configured specifically for Power BI report servers, and that's what we'll look at downloading and installing now. One way to attempt to get access to download your Report Builder application is from the Power BI report server web portal. There is a download button up here which you can use to download extra bits of software, so for instance the Power BI desktop application that's configured for Power BI report server. If you do click the Report Builder option, annoyingly what happens is it takes you away to the website for downloading the SQL Server version of Report Builder, not the Power BI version. Now, as I say, there's not a huge amount of difference at this point. You could use happily the Report Builder for SQL Server to make this work, but in future there may be some more significant differences between the applications. So if you wanted to get access to the Power BI version of Report Builder, the easiest thing to do is to log into the online Power BI web service. So here I am logged in with my own personal free account, and I've got a similar downloads button here at the top of the screen. And if I click on the download button there, I get an option to download Paginated Report Builder. This takes me to the correct download webpage for the Microsoft Power BI Report Builder application. So here I can just click the download button to download the file, and then I get to choose what I want to do with it. Let's just save this. I'll save this to my desktop. So I'll choose the Save As option, stick it on my desktop, and then choose Save. It won't take too long. It's a pretty small file. I get a little security scan running just to ensure that it's safe. Coming from Microsoft, it certainly should be safe. But there we go, that's all now finished. So I can either click the Run button to launch it straight away, or I can navigate back to my desktop and just double click on the file to begin the installation. I'll click the next button and then accept. Oh, I better read the license terms first. There we go. I'll accept those terms. They're all agreeable to me. Let's click next. And then I can choose the location. This location is absolutely fine. I'll hit the next button again, and then I'll finally click install. So I'll confirm that I want that to happen. It's perfectly acceptable to have both the SQL Server and the Power BI Report Builder applications installed side by side. They'll work happily alongside each other. One thing you should be aware of is that once you've installed both versions, then the file associations will be set to the most recently installed edition of the software. So now all of my Report Builder, SQL Server Report Builder reports will be associated with the Power BI Report Builder. But that's not a big problem. I can always change that by just reinstalling them in a different order later. So setup's finished. I can just click the Finish button to complete that. Then let's have a look at how to open up the application and use it to build a basic report. I can open the application by looking for its shortcut in the Start menu. So if I open that up and then scroll down to find, confusingly, the Microsoft SQL Server Report Builder folder. Here it is. If I expand that folder, I'll find my new Power BI Report Builder application sitting in there. This is distinct from my my SQL Server Report Builder, or my original Report Builder application, which is sitting in this folder up here. One other advantage of installing the Power BI Report Builder, rather than just relying on the SQL Server version, is that the color schemes match. So you get the red and white color scheme for SQL Server and the yellow and black color scheme for Power BI. So it's a little bit more satisfying. Let's just pin that to my Start menu to make it easier to find. And I'll just resize that to a small icon and then drag it up to sit it in my little Power BI group. If I then just click on the icon to launch the application, and then I get to my lovely Microsoft Power BI Report Builder splash screen, and it shouldn't take too long to open up into this basic page. Let's just quickly go through the process of creating a simple paginated report. I won't go into too much detail here because, well, as I say, we've got a full tutorial which explains how to do this. But just so you've seen the basic workflow, let's start by closing down this splash screen. Now, to get data in a paginated report, the first thing you'll need to do is generate something called a data source. So in the report data window here on the left-hand side of the screen, we can right-click the data sources folder and then choose to add a data source. This brings up a dialog box with a fairly limited selection of different data types. It's pretty much all database pointers, so you don't get the full range of things you will expect from a Power BI report, where you can connect to, for instance, PDF files, etc. So it's a somewhat more limited scope of connector types. I'm going to give my data source a name. I'll call it Movies. And then I'm going to build up a connection string by clicking the Build button. I'm then going to type in a server name, which I'm going to type in ./SQL 2017. Now, this is a reference to a local instance, a local named instance of SQL Server. You should already have one of those. If you've got your Power BI Report server installed and configured, you could not have done that without a SQL Server, so you must have one available. For reference, you can point back to this video here, video 2.1, install and configure Power BI Report server. What I'll then do is select a database on that server. So I've got a database called Movies, and I'll make sure there's a link in the video description just in case you haven't got this database installed and configured already. And then I can just quickly test my connection to make sure it succeeds, and then click OK again, and click OK again, and there's my basic connection to my Movies database created. Now that I've got my data source, I can use it to build a data set, and I can do that by right-clicking on the data source's name and choosing Add Dataset. I can then give my dataset a name. Let's call it Oscar-nominated films, just so you have a clue as to what's going to be in this dataset. You can then build the dataset either by writing an SQL query, so if you know how to write select statements, you can write it out here, or if you prefer, you can just use the query designer instead. So if I click the query designer button, I can then start selecting the columns I want from the tables in the database to which I've connected by expanding these lists and then choosing fields from the various places. So let's choose a couple of basic fields. Let's go for the direct table first and choose the full name field. Then let's go for the film table and select the title and the release date. And let's have the runtime minutes and the Oscar wins. We better have Oscar nominations as well, I suppose, as that's what we're showing. Let's also have the genre of the film, so I'll get the genre from the genre table. And then I'd like to apply a quick filter to this by using the filters button here. So I can add a filter, and then I can select from my film table, I can select the Oscar nominations field and choose is more than, and then for the value I can type in 0 and then press enter to make sure that I only return Oscar nominated films. I can have a quick check of the results of my query by running it, and that all looked pretty sensible to me. So at that point I can click OK, and then click OK again to finish creating my dataset and make the data available for the report. Now I need to start adding some visualizations to the report. Let's start by removing the default placeholder text box at the top. If I click into that and then press the delete key, that will be deleted. And then I can choose to insert new visuals either by heading to the Insert tab in the ribbon and then selecting the visual I want and then drawing it on the page, or I can just right click into the page and choose Insert, and let's go with a table this time. Let's just move that table up into the top left hand corner by clicking and dragging it, and then I can add fields to my table in a couple of ways, either by hovering the mouse over a table cell and then clicking the field selector and selecting a field. Alternatively, I can click and drag fields from the report data window and drop them into either a blank column like this for release date or runtime minutes, or I can drag the fields in between some existing columns or attach them to either side of the table looking for where the vertical blue line appears. So let's add in Oscar nominations and Oscar wins as well. You'll notice that unlike in Power BI, you don't get a representation of the data when you're designing the report. To see the data, you need to head to the Home tab in the ribbon and then click the Run button. And that will produce the results of the report so you can see that you're looking at the correct stuff. Could do with a bit of tidying up, I suppose. We could make the column width a bit wider and we could change the release date format. So let's head back to the design view. I can't change things when I'm running the report. I have to be in design view to make design changes. So let's just change the width of the title column a bit. And then the easiest way to format the release date cell is either to select it and then view the properties window. So I can make changes in a similar way to using the format panel in a Power BI report. Alternatively here, I could just right click on the release date text box and choose text box properties. And for applying things like a date format, this is a slightly easier way to do it if I select the number tab on the left and then choose the date option and then simply select the date format that I want and then click OK. I can format some basic background colors and font colors as well. Let's just highlight the header row of my table and then head back to the Home tab, and then I can choose a different fill color for the row. Let's go for a blue color and then make the font bold, for example. And then if I run the report again, that looks a little bit neater. Now let's look at how we can save this report and then upload it to the Power BI report server. Let's just hit the save button in the top left hand corner of the screen, and then I'll choose to save this first of all on my desktop. So I'll point to my desktop and I'll call this, what should we call this one? Basic Paginated report, if I can spell that properly. Okay, so now that's saved, what I need to do is navigate back to my web portal. So if I go back to my web browser and go to the home page of my Power BI report server, I can then choose to upload this report. And I can do that by browsing to where it's saved, it's on my desktop, and then just double clicking on the report to upload it. And that shouldn't take too long, it's not a particularly big file. While that's happening, I'll just close down this little message bar at the bottom, and there we go, there's my paginated report deployed to my Power BI report server. If I want to view the report, I can just click on it to load it, and then when the report is loaded, it shows me all the data. I can navigate between the different pages using the basic paging controls at the top. I can choose to export it to those formats I showed you earlier on. I can print it as well. But yeah, there we go. The basic report is there ready to go. It's probably also worthwhile pointing out that you can edit this report using the SQL Server version of Report Builder, so the one that you get linked to if you click the download button from the web portal in the Power BI Report Server. Let's just head back and close down the Power BI Report Builder tool. And then when that's happened, I'll head back to my Start menu and find my shortcut for Report Builder, the SQL Server version. I'm going to right click on this and choose More and choose Run as Administrator. You won't need to do this yourself. This is a bit of an issue with my user account not being connected to its domain at this point. So I'm going to run as administrator, but I'll choose Yes to open up the application. And it opens up, it doesn't take too long. It looked pretty similar. You'll be hard pushed to tell the difference, I think, between the Power BI version and the SQL Server version. A few different options dotted around in different places. But what I'm going to do is choose to open up a saved report, and I'm going to look on my desktop, and then I'm going to choose my basic paginated report.rdl. The extension is the important thing. Whichever application you're using, you're creating an RDL, a report definition language file. So if I double click to open that one up, it all looks pretty familiar. I've got my data source, I've got my data sets, I can insert visuals. Let's just do a quick little bit of tidying up. Let's just change this so that it's got a different coloured title so we can tell the difference. Let's go back and change the fill colour of this one to, let's go for bright green. Beautiful, that will clearly stand out. I can then choose to save this. This will save it straight back to the desktop where I opened it from. But I can also choose to save this directly to my report server. One advantage that this particular version of Report Builder has is that I get the chance to connect to a report server and then save files directly to it. So to do that, I can head to the File menu and then choose Save As. I can then get the option to navigate to a recent site or server because I've connected recently. Actually, I've got my my Power BI report server URL stored in my recent list. I can also choose to connect to that without saving. I can choose to connect to that. So I can click there and then type in or copy and paste the URL of my report server there. So let's head back to the web browser, and I can copy and paste the URL from here, and then paste that in and then just choose to connect to it. So when that has connected, I can choose from the File menu, I can choose Save As, and I can point to my recent sites and servers, report server PBI, and then when that's been selected, I can then just save this paginated report. Let's call it V2 or green version, choose Save, and then if I look back to my web portal, sorry, wrong browser, I can refresh my web portal, and then I ought to see my new V2 version of my basic paginated report appears. And I can click on that to view it with my beautiful lurid green title. I can also use the SQL Server version of Report Builder to edit the reports in place. So if I head back to the Report Builder application and then just close the tool down, I can also choose to edit the basic paginated report from my report server directly in the Report Builder application. So I can click the little ellipsis button, the menu, and then choose Edit in Report Builder. Choose that I want to allow this to open up Report Builder. If I didn't already have it, it will give me a prompt to get it. I'll just close down that little window there. And then I've got my report opened up in the Report Builder application. So this is the original one with the blue headers rather than the green one, of course. If I wanted to make any changes, I can make those changes and then save it directly back to the server and then close down the Report Builder application. I can still edit the deployed report using the Power BI version of Report Builder, but in order to do that, I'd have to download the RDL file first. So if I click the little ellipsis button to launch the menu for the original basic paginated report, I'll first of all need to download it. So this is basically saving a local copy. I'll save this to my desktop. I'll just overwrite the existing version, save that, replace it with the one I'm downloading, and then when that has downloaded, I can navigate back to my desktop, and if I just double click on the report, this will open up in the Power BI Report Builder. This is the one that supersedes the SQL Server version. So there I can make more changes, and then I'd have to save it and then head back to the Power BI Report Server web portal and choose to upload it again to get it back. So it's a bit of a faff doing that with the Power BI version of Report Builder, but it is possible. Just to finish off the video then, the one advantage that the Power BI version of Report Builder gives you is the ability to save directly to the Power BI service. You may have noticed that there's a sign in button sitting up here in the top right hand corner, and if I head to the file menu and choose Save As, I get the option to choose Power BI service, at which point I'll be prompted to sign in. Now, the one small advantage here is that there's no point me signing in because I haven't got a premium account, and currently in order to save a paginated report you need a premium workspace to save it to, and I don't have one of those, so I can't show you that. But when you do sign in you get prompted to pick a workspace and then enter a file name, and that will then be saved to your premium workspace if you have one. So I'll just cancel that. Hopefully you've found something useful in this video, even if you've just got the ability now to create basic paginated reports and you didn't know how to do that before. So I hope you found that useful. Thanks for watching. See you next time.